Welcome to From Stardust to Us, in-depth conversations with thought leaders, artists, and spiritual activists, navigating the challenges of our times with integrity, joy, and purpose. I'm Bernice Marie Daly.
And I'm Linnell Hayden. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate our listeners. You can find us on YouTube, Buzzsprout, or any place where podcasts are found. If you enjoy our conversation, please help us reach more people by subscribing, liking, and commenting. So let's get into this week's conversation. We are pleased to welcome Patricia Pearce with us today. Patricia Pearce was born and raised in Denver, Colorado. After graduating from college, she served as a Peace Corps volunteer in the Andes of Ecuador, an experience that set her on a path of spiritual exploration and into ordained ministry. For 17 years, she served as a Presbyterian pastor, but in the early 2000s, following the death of a close friend, she experienced a spiritual awakening, which showed her that reality is an interconnected whole, the essence of which is love. The separateness and the separate self are illusions in the mind, and that this world is a form of dream. The insights from her awakening led her beyond the bounds of conventional Christian belief, and in 2010, she left the church to embark on a vocation of writing, speaking, and teaching about the global shift in unitive consciousness. She is the author of 2 books, Beyond Jesus, My Spiritual Odyssey, and No One in I-Land, A Parable of Awakening. Patricia shares her latest writings and podcasts on her We Awakening Substack. You can learn more about her and her offerings on her website, patriciapearce.com. Welcome, Patricia.
Well, thank you. I'm really pleased to be with both of you and looking forward to seeing where this conversation leads us.
Yeah, we are too. We've been anticipating this. So just to start us off, I am almost done with your book. You have a very fascinating life story, a few spiritual awakenings, which I would love to get into later in our conversation, ministry work. I'm wondering if you can take us back even before those times, maybe to your childhood or your early years. And was there something, some event or some spark or something that sort of set you off on a lifelong path of spirituality?
That's a great question. I'm not one of those people who at an early age felt like mystical awareness. However, I did grow up in a very, mainstream conventional Presbyterian family, and we went to church every Sunday. And the, religious experience and expression was sort of a private thing in our household. We didn't talk about it at home, but nonetheless, it had some, like, a central place in our lives. I mean, it's clearly very important. And I do remember, though, as a child, at times having, and especially like on Christmas Eve, I loved Christmas Eve, but it's that experience of like we're participating in some sort of a mystery. That's the way it felt. And so it was sort of subtle, I would say, in my upbringing. And it just tended to grow. And you mentioned my time in Ecuador, and that was a time that really it started to open up more fully for me. That dimension of myself, I would say.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
So I was curious about many things that you've shared in your story and your life. And one of the things you said was that Jesus was your guru. Can you talk a little bit about that? How did Jesus become your guru, and Jesus still your guru? Like, let us know. Let us share a little bit about that if that's possible. We can do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So my memoir, as you know, traces my own spiritual evolution. Um, and, I would say I had a complicated relationship with Jesus, the figure of Jesus. And it had to do a lot with how he has been portrayed in conventional Christian belief. And so I wasn't sure, like, what is my relationship even with this figure?
Right. Right.
And by the time and as Linnell mentioned earlier in the introduction, I'd had these awakening experiences where I saw through the veil, in a sense, saw through the illusion of separateness, and yet I could see how that idea of separateness had woven itself into Christian belief and
Uh,
doctrine. And we can talk more about that if you want to. But anyway, all of that is to say that I didn't know what to make of Jesus. At one point, I just kind of wanted to be done with the whole thing, everything.
right.
And and I was, and this is interesting because the title of my book, Beyond Jesus, is not one
Right.
that I came up with.
Oh, okay.
It was a title that I was given. I was driving across country from Philadelphia to Denver to participate in my mother's ash scattering about a year after she died. And
I see.
I'm just driving along the interstate in Ohio, like just like it's just,
Right. Right.
and I'm listening to these podcasts of Krista Tippett's. I've got them all lined up, right? And I'm
Oh, yeah.
listening.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
And
great.
and as I'm driving along, I just like get this information, like just sort of a download that I would write a book called Beyond Jesus that would
Mhm.
talk about how ego consciousness had shaped Christian belief.
Uh-huh.
And it was very clear. So there again, like beyond Jesus, like don't stop at Jesus, like go beyond Jesus. So back to your
Right.
question about the guru.
Right. Right. Right.
So I didn't know, I'd gotten this information that I was going to write this book. I didn't know what form it was going to take. I didn't sense it was going to be a channeled work or anything like that. And then I decided that I would write it as a memoir. And because I felt like, we human creatures are creatures of story. We enter into story. And I
Right.
felt like the
Right.
best way to bring people along was to have them go through my story with me. So anyway,
Mhm.
I am preparing to leave Philadelphia, where I live, to go to California to stay with a friend who offered me a room in Point Reyes to work on the manuscript.
Mm.
And shortly before I left, I had this dream. And it was
Okay.
in the dream that I was told that Jesus was my guru.
Oh, okay.
And and
Wow.
and that he was my guru because of the circumstances of my birth. And
Okay.
the dream showed me this, it gave me this, it's like there was a narrator in the dream telling me Jesus was the guru assigned to me by the circumstances of my birth. And it showed me this woman in India who was there praying with her prayer beads. And the dream was telling me just as she was assigned a guru because of the circumstances of her birth, so is I.
Right.
And
Right.
then at the end of that dream, and there's stuff leading up to this scene that was also really formative for me. But at the end of the dream, there's this face in front of me looking into my eyes, and I know that this is Jesus. And
Right.
we have this moment of, the meditation practice is called trespasso, where you gaze into the eyes of another, and it feels like there's a transmission happening.
Yes.
So, but it was also very clear that guru is not the way we think of it if we're in the ego mind or the mind of separateness, like the guru as somebody separate from us. That's not the case at all. So a guru really is somebody who is embodying the fullness of who we are and and only wants us to awaken to that truth in ourselves.
Yeah.
So that's a very long answer to your question,
Oh, that's great. Oh,
but
that's great. I
I
appreciate it.
felt like the context was important. And at this
Yes.
point,
Yes.
I would say that I have a deeper relationship with the being that we call Jesus than I ever
Mhm.
have. Um,
Uh-huh.
and
Oh, interesting. After all
yeah,
this. Yeah.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Well,
So
you
Yeah.
spent many years as a minister as well, so this must have been a hard um, sort of awakening for you in a lot of ways, right? Let's get into the ego consciousness,
yeah,
or how Christianity has sort of been taken over by separateness and ego.
Yeah.
Not that ego is necessarily negative, but if it causes a separateness, and how maybe the teachings of Jesus might have been altered or changed or misunderstood because of that. If maybe you can shed a little light on that from your perspective, having been in the ministry and then having had these experiences of awakening.
Yeah, it's a great question, Linnell. Um, yes. So first of all, yeah, ego isn't bad. The whole idea of good, bad is a construct from the egoic consciousness. It comes out of this consciousness of separateness and judgment. And so, seeing something as good or as bad is to participate in that same egoic consciousness, that same illusion of separateness. Um, the way that, so how I experience it now, really, it is simply an illusion in the mind. It's a way that the mind creates for itself the experience of separateness, even though separateness in reality is impossible. It doesn't exist. So the way that I came to see how that same consciousness, that egoic consciousness, had kind of infiltrated, I'll say, or shaped Christian belief is, first of all, Christianity typically and conventionally has identified Jesus as the one and only Son of God. So the whole idea of specialness is a concept that comes out of that same idea of separateness. If we're not participating in the idea of separateness, then specialness doesn't exist. And specialness, of course, is a desire to be better than others. So even seeing Jesus as the one and only Son of God is to put him on a pedestal, to make him separate from the rest of us. So that was one way. Also, Christianity took upon itself this identity as being an exceptional religion, like the one and only true way. So that was also another like consequence of bringing egoic consciousness to what Jesus had been teaching. Understanding God as a separate being, that we're separate from God, we're separate from the earth. We have domination over the rest of the planet and the species. So all of these things, and of course, there's the misogyny as well, the separateness and superiority, quote in quotes, of male over female. So all of these things had really shaped Christian expression, and all of them are expressions of that egoic consciousness, which ironically is the consciousness that Jesus himself had transcended and was calling us into. He really was calling us into this unitive state where we know that we are not separate from one another. We know that we are one with our source. So he was calling people into that knowing and that experience and out of this illusory idea of separateness and specialness.
Yeah, that's
So
one
that
thing
gives you sense.
oh,
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, that's it. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to follow up quickly and then I'll let Bernice jump in here. That's one thing that has confused me is um, if Jesus, let's say, did come down and want to be worshipped, would that not be completely egocentric, which is the opposite of what his message and who he was? So it confuses me a little that it's gotten so misinterpreted. So with your the book title Beyond Jesus, which some Christians may bristle at and think, oh, she's diminishing Jesus or whatever. How can someone who is a traditional Christian follow Jesus yet feel this more egalitarian spirituality with him? Does that make sense?
Well, I think it's difficult to, and that was eventually why I needed to leave the church, is I couldn't really reconcile those two things. And especially as a pastor, because as a pastor, you're sort of expected to be representing the belief system.
Sure. You're
And
embodying that. and speaking from
Exactly.
that all the time.
Exactly. That's
Exactly.
what you're supposed to be representing. So,
Right.
it just was no longer feasible for me. I just couldn't reconcile the
Yeah.
worlds that I had, come to experience. So it's difficult. And I think one thing, I'm getting a heart like affirmation here. One thing to understand is that if we're coming back to the title, first of all, Beyond Jesus, it's not a rejection of Jesus, because that itself would be egoic consciousness, to reject, right? But it's to go beyond into the Christ consciousness that he embodied and that is within all of us. So if we stop at Jesus and make him the point of our adoration, as you put it just now, Linnell, then we're not moving beyond the person of him into the essence of him, which is the same essence that we all share. So how can one be like, I think it's possible, especially if you're sitting in a pew in a church, to hold that knowing and to participate in the life of, say, a congregation, and to know that you're not betraying Jesus at all by moving beyond his time-bound embodiment. And that, in fact, you're fulfilling his desire for us all. And, it's the Bible says that he said that, you will do greater things. You will do greater things than I.
Mm-hmm.
And like
So,
to open up to that is like, wow.
Yeah. Thank you.
so perhaps part of the differentiation here is uh, understanding Jesus and the Christ.
Mhm.
Jesus as a reference to an historical person who introduced many things, but it appears that his message has been misconstrued, or overlooked, or ignored the parts that we didn't like, or however that happened over 2,000 years is a long time. It's hard for
Yeah.
us to even imagine.
Yeah.
But if we were able to go underneath the layers of dogma about Jesus, and you make mention that this could be, and I should say the Christ then, because I'm not really talking about a person who lived 2,000 years ago. I'm talking about the Christ energy, which is, well, we can all talk about what that is. But if we were to go beyond the limits of the dogma, there might be a spiritual evolution that has, as you say, astonishing possibilities for the future. And then there was a point in which you received a message, as I recall you saying, to transform story. So I'm trying to imagine that. I'm kind of connecting the dots here about that power of transforming story that maybe grounds the Christ consciousness and what was originally intended in the first place, but we sort of haven't gotten there yet.
Right.
So what would that be? What and if we were to imagine this and live into this Christ consciousness, or a consciousness that we could then start to think about as a global consciousness or a global spirituality. Am I jumping far too here? What do you think of this?
Well, I absolutely agree with what you're saying, that really when we speak of Christ consciousness, we're not referring to an individual at all, first of all. Even though Jesus embodied Christ consciousness, it's not limited to him. It is, for me, Christ consciousness is the awareness of our oneness with all that is.
Mhm.
And when we embody that consciousness, we are bringing that knowing into the physical realm. And so it is by definition a global consciousness, and more than global, it's like it's a universal consciousness. So
Mhm.
it's not limited, and it's not limited to Earth, and it's not limited to humans. It is the consciousness that is, I guess you could think of it as like the matrix in which we
Mhm.
all exist. So I don't know, if maybe you can help me know what the core of the question is. I don't know if I'm going to be addressing, or if I have addressed it. Yeah, let me pause there and give you a chance, Bernice, to.
Well, I think I appreciate that. One of the to transform the story was really part
Yeah.
of what I
Yes.
was looking at. And then one of
Yes.
my other little questions that comes up with this, because I think we're in sync here in terms of
Yeah.
how we're approaching it. But um, I have a little problem with calling it Christ consciousness because that refers to a particular tradition of which there are many people who are not members.
Yep.
And and there is this experience, I think, that many people have. I've had it in the past when you were brought up in a strong Christian environment, um, Catholic in my case, that you're somehow doing something wrong by, not having Jesus be the end all of everything.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm trying to play around with the transforming the story in light of Christ consciousness, but using language that doesn't perhaps identify so much with a particular tradition
Hmm.
that still holds for people a kind of, I'll say, privilege and a kind of attitude. Um, how can we transform the story and still hold on to that?
Yeah. Yeah. I totally understand what you're saying. And I think it's
I'm
true.
glad.
Yeah, no, it's true because that word, just the word Christ, is a word that comes out of a specific lineage. I'll call it
Yes,
lineage,
yes,
tradition or
yes,
lineage.
yes, yes.
And I often will also call it unitive consciousness.
Hmm.
Sometimes I'll call it Buddha consciousness. I do think for myself, like in this moment, there is something about kind of reclaiming or reshaping or reinterpreting or redefining the word Christ that
Hmm.
feels important because that tradition has gone astray in its
Hmm.
understanding of what that is.
Hmm.
So there is something about, for me, about claiming that word, but allowing it to be expanded into something much more than has traditionally been understood. And
Right.
coming back to your transformed story, yeah, that was after that awakening experience. And I was like getting this word first, story, story,
Mm-hmm.
story, just kept playing over and over in my mind. I was
Mm-hmm.
really in like a heightened state of consciousness at the time. And and what I felt, it was like a soundtrack going on in my mind, story, story, story. And it helped me see that we are living in a story. We're playing out a story. We're living
Right.
from a story.
Right.
And the story in our mind is the lens through which we make meaning. So
Right.
story, 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 story. I'm looking around everything. We're in a story. This is a story.
Mm-hmm.
And then the word transform came. Transform, transform, transform. And then the two words, like they inverted and collided, transform story. And it felt like the time is now for us to transform our story. The
Yes.
story that
Yes.
we carry in our mind, that is the lens through which we make meaning and the lens through which we understand reality.
Exactly.
What I didn't hear at that time that I've heard since is
Mm-hmm.
that there's like a word play there. It was saying story, 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 and then transform.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't hear until later transform.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
story is a form of trance.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And when we're living from our story, we are in a
In a
form of
trance.
trance. We're in
Uh-huh.
a trance state.
Uh-huh.
So it was like pointing out story is a form of trance. It's a trance form. And we are living in this dream where we are playing out a story. And
Mm-hmm.
within this world of the dream, it's time to transform our trance form
Mm. To a different story.
to a different story. Yeah,
Right. Right.
exactly.
Uh,
Now, are you
that's very
talking?
fascinating. I love the way you played with those words. That's
Mm,
lovely. And of course, I know what I just want to say one little thing
Go ahead.
that we are exactly in that space of
yes.
recreating our, our new story, our new cosmic
Yeah.
story. So anyway,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Renell,
And for it to come out of this unitive consciousness, the
yes,
story that we've been playing out and playing from has been from the egoic consciousness of separateness, from which we we identify enemies, we other, we judge. All of that
right.
has been the story that we've played out. And
Mhm.
now we're shifting into this unitive awareness where a very different and transformed story can begin to emerge.
Yeah, and it keeps us in a state of sort
Ex-
of adolescence, as far as, we're sitting around waiting for someone else or something else to come and save us, because
Yeah.
we're denying our own divinity and power that comes with that. Now you're not talking, we're talking about as a species, I imagine, right? There's a lot of things that people are labels or stories that that mean a lot to them, like maybe family heritage, ancestry, things like that. So how do we um, hang on to the beauty of our individual stories, yet transform our collective story? How does that work?
Well, I think for me, part of it has been, first of all, we are, and that's kind of the paradox of being human, we are both this particular expression of something that is the all of the all. so so there is this wave state, that is reality, and then it takes on a particular form in a particular person, and that person then has particular experiences. So the way I see it at this point is, our individual experiences and stories and lineages and ancestry are, in a sense, our curriculum, or our way of opening up into this greater knowing of the oneness that we participate in. So I'm not someone who discounts the value of our human experience and all that has played into that. I think it's been essential in our evolution. Um, you can see it as we chose this, we had this desire to have an experience of something that in reality is impossible, which is separateness. And so we decided to sort of create this virtual reality inside of ourselves and our minds so that we can have that experience. But all of those things are, we have our own life curriculum that is leading each of us into this greater knowing. And
Mhm.
Linnell, I have no idea if I'm addressing your question at all.
No,
So I'm
you
going
are. I think for me, yeah, it's uh once we separate ourselves and place ourselves, maybe our stories above others, instead of
to,
as a
oh,
part of the
yeah.
collective. I wanted to, Bernice, did you have a question? Because I want to, okay, if you don't
Please,
mind,
of
I'm
course I
sorry.
do, but please
I'm
go right ahead.
commandeering
I'll
this
jump in.
conversation.
I'll jump in after.
I'm commandeering Patricia. I want to get into something a little more personal. I'm going to read a little passage about one of your experiences of awakening when you were standing in a forest. This is from your book, Beyond Jesus. And you said, I'm not sure where to start with this. Okay. As the waves of energy began to subside, the rain began to let up. When I opened my eyes, I saw a world I had never seen before. Everything, the pool of tears at my feet, the rock, the trees, the sparkling mica-laden soil, everything was vibrant and alive, luminous, infused with a presence. No, not merely a presence, a sentience. Nothing was inanimate. Everything was expressing a life, a totality, a complete oneness, love itself. That just blew my socks off. That is so, the sentience. where you say there's nothing that's inanimate. You know, Bernice interviewed me a couple weeks ago, and I had some sort of similar thing. And when I tell people that my experience is that everything comes of consciousness or everything is conscious, they look at me like I'm a wackadoodle. So like Linnell, is the spoon talking to you right now, let's go take a nap. But you word it so beautifully, and I like your wording better, sentience. Can you dive deeper into that? What does that mean? Nothing is inanimate. I mean, that's just mind-blowing. And how did that transform the way you think of yourself?
Mm. Well, it knocked my socks off too, Linnell, for what that's worth. And yeah, it's that everything, as you say, everything is consciousness. Like nothing, there isn't anything that's a quote object. Like nothing is outside of this totality that we call life, that we call, whatever. This is where, our language breaks down because we don't really have the words for it.
Yeah.
But this reality that we participate in, that we are of, is vibrant, it's alive, it's constantly giving expression to itself in like an infinite number of forms that come forth into some manifestation in the material world, and then they fade away to join back into this wider matrix. So nothing stands outside of that.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is that and is participating as an expression of that. And so even like the things that we would call an object, that everything comes from this matrix.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the mind, when we're in that illusion of separateness, the mind, it's like we bifurcate that wholeness in our own. We can't actually do that. That wholeness can never be bifurcated, but we can bifurcate it in our own awareness. And so we can like put on one side the things that are breathing, and we'll call those living, and we'll put on the other side everything that isn't breathing, and we'll call that inanimate. But it's all the same thing. And this is where the language, just our language can't really convey it. And oftentimes when we try to use language, we just kind of get tripped up, and it's just impossible. So in answer to your other question, how has that shifted? Here's the very weird thing about having experiences like this for myself. I get up in the morning and I make my breakfast, and I engage in these very, quote, mundane activities. I have to navigate the 3D world. And how does one live in that state in which everything is just this huge flux? And how do you live in a state of like just having your mind blown by this state of bliss? How do you do that? And get in the car and drive to the grocery store and do what you need to do there. So for me, yeah, and I'm perhaps, I'm still, learning how to hold both of those together in the same moment. I'm not that good at it yet. I sort of like do this, back and forth and back and forth. I can enter into that state and tap into that. And for me, really, it's the heart center where that happens. It's like constantly available to me, and it's where I palpably experience that state of oneness, that state of union, that state of communion, that state of love. So I can tune in with that, and I can take my heart. I do take my heart center to the grocery store. But, when I have to, choose which cereal I'm going to get, I'm not focused there. I'm focused on the, like, so I don't know. It's just bizarre. Being human, I think, is really a weird kind of an experience. And we all signed up for it, and we have to live in that paradox.
Yeah, thank you.
So you don't ask the cereal, on your heart when we're having a
I'm
conversation.
going to try that. I actually
Well,
am going
I'm
to
going
try
to
that.
admit something that I shouldn't say on public message, but I'm going to admit when I go to the supermarket, when I go to pick out vegetables and fruit, things that are fresh, sometimes I'll pick up the tomato and I'll say, not out loud, because I'll say to myself, does this tomato want to become a human? Because
Mm,
there is something about, which I don't understand, I'm not a scientist, but there is something about this movement into different states. Part of it is an understanding of Hinduism in a story of that. But the it is food that keeps us that we can't live without food and water. I mean, in this organic sentient state. And there is this transformation going on. And sometimes when I go to the supermarket, I'll pick up something and I'll say, well, I wonder if this one would like to be human or that one would like to be human. Now, I know that's a little crazy, and I can't believe I just said that on.
I love it. I love it. And I don't think it's crazy at all. And we have a roof deck on our house here in Philly, and I grow some vegetables up there. And when I go up to harvest, say, the spinach, first of all, I thank it for its ability to transform light into substance.
Isn't that
It's
amazing?
it's remarkable, and my body doesn't do that.
That's right.
So I'm
That's
like, thank you so much. And I also have that sense of that, like yes, I'm going to be taking in the spinach and receiving the nutrients that it so miraculously has
right.
been able
Right.
to bring forth. And in doing that, then it is going to have a human experience as well. So yeah, and that's a great example of how,
Yeah.
everything is
It's a
like,
little crazy. Yes. Yes.
it is
Yes.
crazy from that, from the vantage point of the way, consensual reality, if we want to use that term.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
But I remember Thomas Berry saying at one point that photosynthesis has to be one of the greatest miracles of the universe ever.
truly,
That
truly.
that communication that's going on between a sun that is I don't know how many gajillions of miles away that can attract a root, a seed in the ground, up and out, and create. I probably maybe because maybe because I grew up in New York. That's a whole other story. Okay, I'm really going off here, Liddell. My apologies. I would like to. Well, it's a sort of a shift. Um, I was so happy to see you use this phrase. Um, the divine feminine and Christ consciousness are on the rise as humanity awakens to the truth of our interconnectedness and interdependence with all reality. Um, I'm particularly interested in the relationship or how you understand that phrase, the divine feminine in Christ consciousness. Can you say more?
Yeah. So my experience of the divine feminine is an energy that, um, here again, the words, right? It's not like the young or the male focused energy. It's more of like a if I make a gesture and a word comes to either of you, please don't hesitate to offer it. But it's more like um it's
Expansive,
Diffuse,
nurturing.
diffuse.
it's diffuse, and it's also receptive.
Mm.
Like it's not like focused on like a particular point. It envelops everything. It's more so okay, here's a metaphor that offers itself. It's the difference between a laser and a light bulb. I think of the laser as like the energy of like more the masculine, more focused, and the light bulb is more global. more radiant. So I experience the energy that way. And it's not an energy that has to make anything happen or accomplish anything. It is complete in itself. And so it's that state of being that doesn't have to do, because it just from its own beingness, things arise. Things arise. And so for me, that feels very aligned with the phrase or the term Christ consciousness, because that also it's universal, it's global, it enfolds and encompasses everything. It is everything. So also I feel as though, part of I believe what we're here to do is to learn how to embody and bring into expression both of these, to this global energy that can receive everything. Here's something else about the divine feminine that I experience. It's like that energy that can embrace and take into itself everything, and that everything becomes transmuted within this feminine energy, and it becomes transmuted into, love itself. So I sense, or maybe that's just me, I want to, in my own life, live into the ability to be in touch with that feminine energy and allow it to flow through me into a particularity of form, like specificity. So to take like the universal and to allow it to become the specific, the individual in that sense. And I share in the book this this dream that I had that was one of the most important dreams that I've ever had. And I've had some pretty big dreams. Dreams have been huge in my own spiritual path. But this one dream where, just cutting to the end of the dream, but there is this archetypal figure, female figure arises, like this male figure morphs into this female figure. And I, in the dream, perceive her as a dire threat to the entire world. And I feel compelled to try to stop her. I see her as evil, as the embodiment of evil, and it's on me to stop her. And so I go up to her in this very like heroic move, right? It's up to me to save the world, right? So, and I bring my arms up and my eyes roll back in my head, and I bring my arms down, and I'm going to zap her with my spiritual energy, right? And I do this. I try to zap her. She is completely unfazed. And I feel myself being enveloped in her energy, and I'm paralyzed. And that's when she says something that at that point in my life, I heard as a curse. She says to me, I don't need, it's something like, I don't need divine strength because God's spirit is in me, something like that. And she says back to me, oh yeah? Soon you will know no one. And in the dream, I feel myself catapulted out into this void, out into the great void all by myself. You will know no one. And as I unpacked that dream, and it was decades before I began to understand what it was about, but it wasn't a curse. She was, soon you will know no one. You will know no one. There's no one individual. Nothing is alone. And you will come to know that there is no one. And I feel now that she was a depiction of the divine feminine that is emerging in our time. And the mind that has been so instilled with patriarchal patterns sees her, perceives her as evil and a dire threat, and she needs to be stopped.
Absolutely.
And I
Absolutely.
think that's a lot of what is playing out right now is the urgent and futile attempt to stop the emergence of the divine feminine. And
Right.
we see it expressing itself in the suppression of women and all of that. So it's like, the divine feminine and Christ consciousness, they're very much interrelated for me.
So the image I had as you were talking about that, especially in the beginning of this male personage morphing initially into this female, was in fact Christ, quote, Christ morphing into the divine feminine.
Oh,
That
beautiful.
is our ability to make those connections in a profound way, because we still have, not only do we have Christ back to Jesus 2,000 years ago, but we also have Christ as male. And as
Yes.
close as we've come to wisdom, which is feminine, we still don't quite allow him to morph
Yeah,
into this feminine
that's so
divine
true.
presence.
That is
Thank you
so
so
true.
much. That,
Mm,
that was wonderful.
yeah.
Thank you.
I suffer from dream envy reading your book. You have all these amazing dreams. I don't remember any of my dreams, but oh wow, I was going to ask you about that dream. So thank you for bringing that up. And I love the analogy of the light bulb versus the laser.
Mm,
And they're both needed,
yeah.
they're both
Yeah.
useful. There
Yes.
seems to be, um, as Bernice and I speak to more and more people, there seems to be sort of a consciousness, an evolution of consciousness happening. More and more people are having these types of experiences.
Mm,
And I wanted to ask you, in your book, you talked about after having these awakening experiences, you also had a struggle with your ego, laying
mm,
claim to them, which
yes.
is, it's a well-worn path, isn't it, to live. And I mean the ego that separates us,
Yes. Yes.
So I think this is a common thing that happens. So how do we
Absolutely.
navigate that? How did you navigate it? What happened?
Well, um, how did I navigate it? Very, very clumsily, I would say. Um, and so here was the irony. So I'd grown up in the church, I'd gone to seminary, I'd studied all this theology and all of that. And I was completely unequipped to understand what I was experiencing, what I was going through when I had these awakenings, because my religious tradition didn't talk about this. And that's another thing about, projecting everything onto Jesus.
Mhm.
Like we don't have those kinds of opening experiences. So first of all, I was at a loss. I couldn't really draw on anything in my own religious upbringing or training to navigate what I was experiencing. But there is like this automatic response, I think, at least probably for the vast majority of people, when we have these experiences, the ego doesn't just disappear. It gets sidelined for a moment when we have this awareness of oneness, but but the patterns are still in the mind, and so they come back. And the ego is, the mind in that egoic state, as you say, it's all about separateness. And so, this experience sets me apart, right? It makes me special. And so I noticed those patterns coming into my mind. And so the one thing that helped me navigate that was like the one story that I could turn to in my religious tradition was the story of Jesus going into the wilderness to be tempted by, quote, Satan, after he had this awakening in his own baptism. So in the biblical story, Jesus goes to John the Baptist to undergo a baptism, and in that experience, he comes to know himself as like a child of the divine, and to know himself as fully loved. You are my beloved. With you I am pleased. And so he has this experience of the divine being his own source. He has this experience of himself being absolutely and completely loved. And then the Spirit takes him into the wilderness. And he's there in the Bible story for 40 days and 40 nights, which in Bible speak is a long time. And there he has to face these egoic temptations to be set apart, to be special, to be worshiped. And time again, he would say, no, no, no. And he would come back to the only reality is that divine reality that I experience, that I know that I come from. And so that story for me became like the thing that I could hold on to. And so I could witness these patterns arising in my mind and not buy into them, not buy into them, not give them credence. So, it doesn't happen right away. It's like the onion, all these layers, they keep peeling back and peeling back as we get more and more and more to the core of like the remaining roots of the illusion in our own minds of separateness.
Yeah, I think if our ego's telling us we're special, then that's the first red flag, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. And that's where I saw that's what had happened to Christianity. That those egoic patterns had come into the expression. Like, oh, aren't we special? We follow this savior figure, this one and only Son of God. And so anytime that we are experiencing any sense of specialness, we know that we are coming from that illusion of separateness.
Yeah, a lot of religions do that, actually.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're more familiar with, or at least I am with Christianity.
Yeah.
Bernice, I want to give you a chance before I continue, as I can do.
Good conversation. Thank you so much. I would like to maybe talk about connecting the dots between everything that we've been talking about and what you call awakened activism.
Yeah. Yeah. So that also has been part of my journey, has also been engaging in, civil disobedience and having experiences where, and I had the blessing of engaging in those experiences with other people who are very spiritually grounded and rooted. So those were not so much political expressions as they were spiritual expressions. And so for me, awakened activism right now is, we find ourselves in this moment right now, where there's a lot of shit hitting the fan, so to speak, of the egoic, the legacy of those egoic patterns and the suffering and all that they've caused. And it's all coming up to the surface for us to behold it. And it's really shadow content that needs to be seen. So for me, awakened activism it's about choosing to be active in the world from that awakened state, from that knowing of our oneness. So much of what we think of when we think of activism comes out of the dualistic mind, out of the idea of separateness, where there's an us and a them, there's a good guys and a bad guys, and it's all about overcoming the bad guys, conquering the bad guys, vanquishing the bad guys. So it's very dualistic in its orientation. And the thing is, as we've already talked about, everything is arising from consciousness. Everything that we're experiencing is a manifestation of consciousness. And so if the shit show that we're seeing playing out in the world is a manifestation of a dualistic mind and the mind of in separateness, and I use, the word shit show, like just like it, because it's jargon that we can maybe, but if all of that is arising from consciousness, from this consciousness of separateness, if that's what it looks like, if the consciousness of separateness looks like that when it manifests in the world, well, if we want to change, if we want to transform that story, it can only be truly transformed at the level of consciousness, because that's where it's coming from. So it's about really being actively engaged at the level of consciousness and being present in the world as an embodied human, embodying that consciousness. And it can take on many forms. I mean, for me, I do go to the No Kings
Mm-hmm,
events
mm-hmm,
because
mm-hmm,
I want this human body to show up
mm-hmm,
in that context and be
mm-hmm,
counted.
mm-hmm.
And also, I want to be in that context holding a particular frequency, if you want to call it that, a particular
Right, right,
consciousness,
right.
so that, we have the ability to seed the whole field of consciousness with our own awareness of the state of oneness. So awakened activism is really being actively engaged in the world from that place of unitive knowing.
Yeah, thanks for that explanation. I was going to ask about that as well. It's certainly not, I mean, anybody can do this. It's certainly not, there might be people listening saying, oh, well, I've never had these awakened experiences, but they're not necessary in
No,
order to live as, through your heart, obviously, and show up in
right,
that context.
right. That's absolutely
That's
right.
again
Yeah.
is another separation. There's nothing special about this fluke that
I
happens to
know,
some people,
exactly.
you
That's
know.
right. And it's not even necessary. It's
Mm-mm.
not necessary. Having those kinds of like dramatic awakening
Yeah,
moments is not necessary to our awakening.
right.
For some people, it's much more gradual and subtle, and it's more like it's not so much like a bolt of lightning as it is like a flower, a bud
Mm,
that is gradually opening.
mm,
And in some ways, I think that might be the preferable path
yeah.
because it's just not as fraught with so much tumult and drama, and so we can come to know our oneness with the all in many, many, many different ways.
Mm,
And we can bring that, just, whenever we know ourselves to be love and know ourselves to be loved, we are embodying that state. And we can bring that awareness into any moment, into any interaction, into any context.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Well, unfortunately, I think we're getting close to the end.
We are
Denise, did you
indeed.
have one
It's always
last?
amazing how this time goes so quickly. Want to invite you, if you would, if you could share with us a favorite quote, because that's sort of become part of our thing, if you will, asking our guests to share a favorite quote. And then if there is a particular way you would like folks to get a hold of you, what is your
Yeah.
preferred contact information, just to share
Right.
that with us now. And um, thank you so much. It's been a fascinating and a wonderful conversation. It's
Yeah, and
great to connect.
Patricia, please tell us about your group, Awakened Activism as
Oh,
well.
yeah. Yes. Yes. So, yeah, I'll share my quote in just a moment. And yeah, there's on my website, I have an online course called Awakened Activism. So if people are interested in exploring that, they can go on to patriciapearce.com. And that's Pearce. I tell people if they don't know how to spell it, it's peace. It's peace, like the
Oh.
peace sign. And there go the balloons. It's peace with an R.
Oh, that was so
Fascinating.
funny.
Yeah. So, yeah, and it's where I share, I share my understanding of awakened activism and my experiences of that, and offer some ways people can live into that. And then there are also a couple of groups that have come out of the workshops and courses that I've done around that. So anyway, that would be a place where people can plug in if they're interested. And so my quote, there's so many possibilities.
I know.
So many. I mean, I could, that could be an interview in itself. But this
Yes.
one just came across my awareness just recently, and I really love it. And so I thought I would share it. It's very brief. It's one from Rumi.
Please. Yes.
And it says, if everything around seems dark, look again. You may be the light.
Thank you.
So that feels really like something for us to live into. And then for people, if they want to get in touch with me, I have a contact form on my webpage if people want to reach out that way. And as Linnell mentioned earlier, I also have a Substack where I blog and I share podcasts and interviews and such.
Share the link for that. Share the name of that.
It's called We Awakening. We Awakening, all one word. So yeah.
Very good.
On
Thank you
Substack.
so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patricia.
It's been a delight to be with both of
Lovely,
you.
lovely. Thank you.
Really such a rich conversation. I've loved it.
Yes. And if our listeners want to get in touch with Linnell or myself also, please feel free to contact us at fromstardusttous@gmail.com.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.